Amaka Taylor, a homeless girl accused of witchcraft, never imagined her life would carry her from the cold, unforgiving streets of her town to the marble halls of a billionaire's mansion. But the moment she reached out to the frail, wheelchair-bound daughter of the world's wealthiest man, something impossible began to happen. Emily Hawthorne, who had never walked a step in her life despite every doctor, every treatment and every hope, suddenly felt a strange warmth in her legs as if the world itself was bending to Amaka's touch. But why did this poor, rejected girl possess a gift no medicine could explain? And how could her presence awaken a miracle that had eluded the brightest minds? And more terrifyingly, what would happen when Emily's father, billionaire Peter Hawthorne, discovered exactly who she really was? Would the world see a healer or the witch everyone had feared? Every morning before sunrise, Amaka Taylor sat on the cracked stone bench outside the bus stop, her worn coat pulled tight around her thin frame, a tattered backpack at her feet. In one hand, she clutched a crumpled textbook, in the other, a paper cup of lukewarm coffee she had scraped together from a corner cafe. She barely noticed the cold seeping into her bones anymore. It was the way the world looked at her that burned. People avoided her, crossed to the other side of the street, whispered behind their hands, and sometimes spat in the dirt near her feet. They called her cursed, a witch, a danger to the village. But the only crime Amaka had ever committed was seeing what others could not. The faint shimmer of a sick child's aura. The subtle tremor of fate that hinted at outcomes no one else could predict. Her stepmother, Marlene Taylor, had been the first to brand her evil. Ever since Amaka had healed the neighbor's boy who had fallen ill from a rare fever, rumors had spread, fanned by fear and jealousy. Marlene had scolded her, beat her, and locked her in the cold attic, calling her a witch with eyes full of hate. Amaka remembered the night vividly, the storm rattling the shutters, her small hands pressed against the wooden floor and her mother's voice shouting, "You'll bring ruin to this family if anyone ever finds out what you can do." She had cried herself to sleep, clutching a small locket her real mother had left her, wishing for a life where she wasn't feared, a life where her gift was a blessing instead of a curse. Days bled into nights. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, her clothes were threadbare, and the streets became her home. She slept under awnings, in alleyways, and sometimes by the market, where the smell of fresh bread tormented her. Still, she held on to her visions, strange, vivid dreams of a man in a black suit and a young girl in a wheelchair. Night after night, she heard herself whisper, "I can make her walk," and woke with her heart pounding and her stepmother's laughter echoing in her mind. Something about those visions pulled her forward, an invisible string she could not ignore, even when the world had turned its back. Meanwhile, in a city far from the harsh streets Amaka called home, billionaire Peter Hawthorne stared at his daughter, Emily, in the luxury gym they had built for her. Machines designed to help her strengthen her muscles stood unused. Doctors had come and gone, and every specialist in the country had failed. Emily's wheelchair remained her constant companion, and Peter's eyes betrayed the exhaustion of a father who had tried everything and lost hope with every passing year. He never let Emily see his despair, but alone in his office he would pace, rubbing his forehead, imagining a life she might never live. He didn't know it yet, but their fates were about to collide with a girl whose hands were small, but whose power was extraordinary. That night, Amaka dreamt again. The storm from her childhood attic was gone, replaced by a gentle golden light. The man in the black suit knelt beside the girl in the wheelchair, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Amaka's voice rang out, firm, unwavering, "I can make her walk." She woke with a start, the words still echoing in her mind, and a new determination steeling her resolve. She knew the path would not be easy. The city loomed ahead like a wall of impossible challenges, but the pull in her chest would not let her ignore the vision. By the fourth day after her stepmother's latest outburst, Amaka had decided she could no longer remain in the village. With a torn bag slung over her shoulder, she left behind the familiar cruelty of Marlene and the whispers of the townspeople. Hunger and cold pressed in on her, but she followed her instincts, walking mile after mile toward a city she had never seen. Each step felt guided, as though the golden light from her dream was now leading her through the dark streets and over cracked sidewalks. At a roundabout where children played near a fountain, Amaka saw them, the man and the girl from her visions. Emily Hawthorne was as frail as she had imagined, her small hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair. her wide blue eyes staring blankly at the fountain. Peter Hawthorne approached her, offering food and coins to the girl who had appeared out of nowhere. Amaka hesitated, then stepped forward, heart hammering. Voice trembling but clear. "I can make your daughter walk." Peter froze, suspicion tightening his jaw, but Emily's head turned slightly, and her eyes seemed to brighten with recognition, as though she too had seen the vision the night before. Guards shifted uneasily. Doctors exchanged wary glances, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Peter's questions came quickly, sharp and protective, but Amaka's answers were calm, precise, and strangely confident. She explained nothing of the mechanics, only that she could help. And when both she and Emily described the same dream from the night before, Peter's disbelief faltered. Something larger than chance had brought this homeless girl to his doorstep, a girl he had almost ignored, a girl the world had already rejected. That night, as he reluctantly allowed her into the mansion, a flicker of hope sparked within him. Hope that the impossible might finally be possible, and that a miracle could unfold in the hands of a girl they had all overlooked. Amaka stepped into the grand foyer of the Hawthorne mansion, her worn shoes barely making a sound against the polished marble floors. The scent of polished wood and expensive perfumes filled her nostrils, a sharp contrast to the damp, acrid air of the streets she had left behind. Guards lingered near the walls, their expressions rigid, yet even they seemed unsure how to react to a girl so small, so ragged, yet emanating an unexplainable calm. Emily sat in her wheelchair in the center of the room, a delicate blanket draped over her lap, and watched Amaka with wide, curious eyes. There was no fear in Emily's gaze, only recognition, as though she had known this girl for years in a place far away from the mansion, far away from the cold logic of medicine. Peter Hawthorne followed closely behind, his expression a mixture of skepticism, hope, and something deeper, an instinctive sense that this girl might change everything. Doctors had accompanied him, hovering silently, stifling coughs and clearing throats nervously, their medical training telling them this was impossible, their pride telling them to intervene. Amaka's gaze flicked to them briefly, then returned to Emily, unwavering. She knelt beside the wheelchair and whispered, "I need you to trust me, that's all." Emily's fingers twitched, the tiniest movement, but enough to send a thrill through Amaka's chest. Amaka had prepared for this moment in the only way she knew how, with the memory of her grandmother's remedies, the rare roots and herbs she had secretly studied, and the quiet faith that had carried her through nights of hunger and fear. She retrieved a small bundle from her torn bag, a root that glimmered faintly in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. "This strengthens the nerves," she explained, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Prepared correctly, it can awaken muscles that have lain dormant." Peter's brow furrowed. The doctors murmured cautions, citing nerve damage, muscle atrophy, and countless other medical explanations that could not account for what Amaka proposed. Yet Emily's eyes held a glimmer of anticipation, as though she understood something beyond science. The first day was quiet and tense. Emily drank the bitter concoction, her face scrunching at the unfamiliar taste, but she obeyed Amaka's instructions. At first, nothing happened. Peter hovered nearby, his hands clasped, knuckles white. Doctors whispered doubts and concerns, but Amaka remained calm, as if the entire room existed on a different plane than the ticking clock and skeptical minds. Emily soon grew drowsy, her eyelids heavy, and Amaka guided her gently to a bed where she could rest. "Sleep," Amaka said softly. "Your body is learning." Peter paced, unable to stop himself from checking Emily's pulse, her breathing, her every twitch. Yet in her dreams she moved, her mind walking in places her body could not, and Amaka knew the process had begun. That night, Amaka couldn't sleep. She wandered the mansion's garden, the scent of roses mingling with the damp earth, and allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought of her stepmother's cruelty, of the nights she had spent shivering on stone benches, of the hunger that had gnawed at her ribs, and of the dreams that had led her here. She realized that the same kindness Peter had shown her, offering food and listening without immediate judgment, was the spark that could unlock miracles. Even amidst wealth, it was empathy, not money, that created change. And yet she also sensed danger. Her gift, feared by so many, might invite envy or suspicion. If Peter discovered her true identity as the girl exiled from her village, as the one accused of witchcraft, would he recoil? Would the miracle be snatched away before it could flourish? Emily slept deeply that night, her breath slow and even. Amaka sat beside her, eyes scanning every movement, every twitch of a finger, every small sign that her presence was making a difference. Peter had returned to his office, his mind racing. He couldn't understand the mechanics, but he felt the truth of it in his bones. This girl had a power he could not buy, a gift no doctor had ever possessed. He remembered the moment he had first seen her in the roundabout, the inexplicable pull that had guided her steps to his daughter. He thought of every failed experiment, every broken hope, and realized that the miracle might have begun the day he had shown her simple kindness, feeding a starving child he didn't know. Over the next 2 days, Emily continued to sleep more than she ate, and Amaka remained steadfast, patient, and gentle. The doctors grew anxious, whispering about risks and ethics, but Peter watched with quiet reverence. Slowly, Emily's body began to respond. Fingers twitched more strongly, legs shifted subtly, and for the first time in her life, a faint warmth radiated through her limbs. Amaka's hands hovered nearby, ready to guide, ready to soothe, yet careful not to push too far. In her mind, she recalled the stories of her grandmother, of healing through care, love, and attention rather than force. The mansion, filled with grandeur and wealth, now held a quiet sanctuary where patience and faith challenged the logic of science itself. By the 4th day, Emily stirred awake with a start, eyes wide, and a look of wonder crossing her face. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she flexed her toes, then her ankles, and finally, after a breathless pause, began to lift her legs. Peter and the doctors froze, unable to comprehend the scene before them. Emily's hands gripped the arms of the wheelchair, then pushed against the floor, and step by careful step she stood. Her laugh, soft at first, then growing stronger, filled the room, echoing through the marble halls. Amaka watched, her own heart soaring as Emily took her first unassisted steps toward her father. Peter knelt, tears threatening, realizing that what he had dismissed as impossible had indeed happened. And in that moment, Amaka understood something profound. Miracles were not about wealth, knowledge, or status. They were about heart, courage, and the quiet persistence to act when no one believed in you. The morning after Emily's first unassisted steps, the mansion was buzzing with a mix of awe and caution. Staff whispered behind closed doors, doctors huddled in corners discussing what they could not explain, and Peter Hawthorne strode through the halls with a gravity in his step that only a father who had seen the impossible could carry. Amaka Taylor moved quietly beside Emily, guiding her carefully, her hands steady but her heart racing. She knew that what they had witnessed yesterday was only the beginning. Emily's muscles were weak, her balance untested, and the gift Amaka carried came with limits that could not be ignored. Yet there was a strange trust forming between them, a bond forged not by wealth or privilege but by vulnerability and hope. Amaka thought back to the first time she had realized her gift. She had been 8 years old, watching her mother shake with fever, her fingers cold and stiff. Marlene had locked her out of the house, calling the girl in the bed, sick because of her own sins. But Amaka had stayed, placing her hands over her mother's trembling body, whispering words she barely understood herself. When her mother had shivered less, when color had returned to her cheeks, Amaka's heart had swelled with the bittersweet mixture of triumph and fear. That fear had grown as she aged. Each act of healing brought whispers, accusations, and eventually exile. Now standing in the mansion, she felt a strange serenity. She was no longer alone, and for the first time, her gift might be accepted. Peter watched Emily practice walking with Amaka's guidance. Each step was tentative but growing more confident. Tears filled his eyes, not for relief alone, but for the stark realization that a child once deemed helpless could now laugh, explore, and live fully. Yet a shadow lingered in his mind, the shadow of doubt, of questions that had no easy answers. Who was this girl really? Where had she come from? Why had fate guided her to them? And what would happen if the world learned she had been accused of witchcraft, branded as dangerous, shunned by her own family? Amaka sensed his unease but chose silence, focusing instead on Emily. She had prepared a simple routine: gentle walks in the garden, light exercises to strengthen the legs, and small stretches to awaken muscles that had been dormant for years. Each evening she prepared a small herbal mixture, ensuring Emily's body received nourishment and care beyond anything medicine alone could provide. Emily began to dream vividly, her mind walking in places her body could not yet follow. And Amaka watched with quiet pride, guiding her with a careful mix of encouragement and discipline. In quiet moments, Peter approached Amaka in the library, his tone hesitant. "I need to know," he said, his eyes searching hers. "Who are you, really? And why did you appear to us the way you did?" Amaka looked at him, her gaze steady, unwavering, yet filled with the weight of truth she had carried all her life. She spoke cautiously, recounting her childhood, her stepmother's cruelty, the villagers' fear, the visions and the dreams that had led her here. Peter listened, absorbing every word, the pieces of the puzzle fitting together slowly. His skepticism softened, replaced by something resembling awe and fear. A fear that such a gift, if misunderstood, could draw attention, envy, or worse. Meanwhile, Emily's recovery accelerated. Each day she walked further, laughed more freely, and explored spaces that had once been forbidden to her. Staff members were astonished, the doctors cautiously optimistic, and Peter's pride swelled alongside his gratitude. Yet, even amidst the triumph, the mansion's walls seemed to whisper caution. Amaka's gift was extraordinary, but it was fragile. One wrong word, one careless action, and the fragile balance between faith and fear could shatter everything they had worked for. Amaka often retreated to the garden in the evenings, reflecting on her journey. She thought of the village that had rejected her, the nights of hunger, the cold stone benches, the shadows that had chased her through her childhood, and she thought of Emily, a child born into privilege but trapped by circumstance whose joy had been dormant for years. The juxtaposition struck her. Two lives so different yet intertwined by fate, by need, and by a force neither could fully explain. It reminded her why she had endured every hardship, to reach this moment, to stand as a bridge between despair and hope. On the fifth day, as Emily practiced walking down a long hallway, Peter observed quietly, feeling a mix of awe and fear. Amaka walked beside her, guiding, encouraging, silently praying that nothing would disrupt the delicate progress. Suddenly, Emily paused, her hand gripping Amaka's arm. Her eyes widened, and she pointed toward the study, where a shadow moved across the window. Peter stiffened. The fear he had tried to ignore surged up. Was it a reflection of doubt or an omen? Amaka's lips pressed together, her mind racing. She sensed no danger in the room itself, only in what might come when the world learned who she was. Peter took a deep breath. "Amaka, whatever happens, I want you to know," he said quietly. "You've changed more than my daughter's life. You've changed mine, and I won't let anyone take that away from either of you." Amaka looked at him, recognizing the sincerity in his tone, and for the first time, allowed herself to hope. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in her life, she felt something she had longed for: safety, acceptance, and the quiet knowledge that her gift, though feared by so many, could finally be a force for good. And yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast golden light across the mansion, Amaka couldn't shake the feeling that this miracle, though beautiful, was only the beginning. Questions loomed. How would the world react to the girl once shunned? Would the villagers who cast her out ever understand what she had done? And most pressing of all, how long could she protect Emily from the curiosity and suspicion that would inevitably follow? The morning sunlight poured through the mansion's towering windows, illuminating Emily's room as she stood at the center of it, steady on her own 2 feet. Amaka Taylor hovered nearby, her hands ready to support if needed. But her heart swelled as Emily took step after confident step, laughter spilling freely. Peter Hawthorne watched from the doorway, a mixture of pride and disbelief etched across his face. Every doctor, every specialist, every doubt and worry, all of it had led to this moment, and yet the miracle was not theirs to claim alone. It belonged to the girl who had endured years of rejection, hunger, and ridicule, who had walked through fire and emerged unbroken. News traveled fast. Staff whispered of the girl who had healed Emily Hawthorne, the child of the billionaire who could not walk, and word soon reached the media. Peter anticipated the storm. Questions, speculation, perhaps even ridicule, but Amaka remained calm. She had faced a lifetime of misunderstanding. The world's curiosity seemed tame in comparison. Yet when Peter formally introduced her to the staff and doctors as the girl who had made Emily walk, the room went silent. Some clapped hesitantly, others stared, wide-eyed and uncertain as the weight of her story began to sink in. Weeks passed. Emily's strength grew, her steps more confident, her laughter more frequent, and Peter's admiration for Amaka deepened. Yet the true test awaited, the public revelation. Amaka had requested one thing above all, her name. For years the witch had defined her and she wanted nothing more than to reclaim her identity. Peter agreed without hesitation, proud to restore dignity to a girl who had shown him the meaning of courage, patience, and love. He issued a statement. Amaka Taylor, once shunned and feared, had healed his daughter when science could not, and her gift was to be celebrated, not condemned. The world reacted with awe and fascination. News outlets called her a miracle worker. Human interest stories highlighted her resilience, and Emily shared her gratitude openly, speaking of the hope Amaka had brought into her life. Yet amidst the praise, the past could not be ignored. Marlene Taylor, Amaka's stepmother, was confronted publicly, her cruelty laid bare, her disbelief and envy met with universal condemnation. Villagers who had once jeered now watched in silence as the girl they had scorned stood tall, her name cleared, her reputation restored. The contrast was staggering. The girl they had called a witch, now a symbol of faith, strength, and the extraordinary power of kindness. Amaka did not rest on her newfound fame. She focused on Emily, helping her regain full mobility, encouraging her independence and ensuring her dreams were no longer limited by circumstance. Peter, inspired by Amaka's story, established a foundation in her name to support gifted children overlooked by society, creating scholarships, mentorship programs, and safe spaces for young talents like Amaka herself. It was a life she could never have imagined on the streets of her village, yet it felt natural, as though every hardship had been a step leading her here. The first public event was held in the mansion's grand hall, where Amaka stood beside Emily and Peter. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled, and yet amidst the chaos, Amaka remained composed, her gaze steady, her presence commanding without effort. She shared her story, recounting the nights of hunger, the cold stone benches, the accusations of witchcraft, and the dreams that had guided her. She spoke of faith, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that had led to a miracle. Tears glistened in Emily's eyes, and Peter's pride radiated outward. A father who had witnessed the impossible and honored the one who had made it real. Evenings were quieter, filled with reflection. Amaka wandered the mansion's garden, feeling the warmth of acceptance, the comfort of safety, and the knowledge that her gift was finally understood and cherished. Emily ran along paths she had never walked before, free from her wheelchair, free from doubt, free from limitation. Peter observed, grateful beyond words, realizing that the miracle had begun the moment he had fed a hungry, homeless girl without expectation. That simple act of kindness had unlocked what wealth, knowledge, and privilege could not: hope, healing, and the extraordinary power of the human heart. Months later, Amaka enrolled in a private educational center, continuing her studies while maintaining her healing work. She lived modestly, content yet fully respected, and her foundation grew, supporting children whose gifts might have been ignored, misunderstood, or feared. Villagers who once mocked her now visited, seeking guidance inspired by her journey from outcast to heroine. Emily thrived under Amaka's guidance, walking confidently, exploring the world with curiosity and sharing laughter freely. Peter stood beside both of them, his respect, admiration, and love evident in every gesture. The story of Amaka Taylor became more than a tale of a miracle. It became a testament to perseverance, courage, and the quiet, transformative power of compassion. She had faced cruelty, hunger, and isolation, yet her heart had remained pure. In healing Emily, she had healed a part of herself, reclaimed her name, and inspired countless others. The world watched in awe, realizing that miracles were not only about the impossible, they were about the unseen acts of love, the courage to act when no one believed, and the unshakable faith in the good that lies within humanity. And as Amaka stood with Emily and Peter at the edge of the garden, the golden light of sunset casting long shadows over the mansion, she allowed herself a rare smile. The journey had been long, the obstacles many, but the truth was undeniable. Her gift had changed the world, and in doing so, it had finally given her the life she had always deserved.